We may have been exposed, but we will not be stopped. The process has already been initiated, and now, time is the last barrier between our success and your demise.
We know your game, yes, and we know your name, and we shall bring you to shame for what you've done. How could you do that to our children? The judge's guys are just no surprise, and we see through your lies once again. Goodbye, Mr. Rothschild. Goodbye, Mr. Rothschild. Goodbye, Mr. Rothschild. Goodbye, Mr. Rothschild. You may have a reptiliano bloodline, but we don't care, 'cause we're pure, we don't need you anymore. You're royal Merovingian ties into this festive Nephilim life, and we can only despise your future plans. Goodbye, Vaticana. Goodbye, Viola Singer. Goodbye to Sumeria. And your Lord was Draconia.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Alan?
That was Goodbye, Mr. Rothschild. Welcome back to another edition of the Awake and Aware radio show. This is your host, Infinite Consciousness, commonly known as Jason. Please visit Awake and Aware and Part of the Solution on Facebook and check out Freedom from Compulsions at www.freedomfromcompulsions.vpweb.com. Last week we discussed the CIA asset Osama bin Laden and how the U.S. have used this lie to invade various nations for a Zionist agenda. This week we'll be discussing the Rothschilds, who are at the tip of the pyramid of corruption in this dimension. Once again, I have tons of information to go over, so I'm actually going to be going even quicker than usual, if you can believe that. So let's get started here. The Rothschild bloodline stems from ancient Sumer and later from ancient Babylon, where they set up the corrupt money systems in order to control the masses with debt. They became known as the Bowers and then later changed their name to Rothschild, which means red shield, in reference to the upward-facing triangle that represents masculine energy superimposed on the downward-facing triangle that represents feminine energy. This was originally known as the Seal of Solomon, for King Solomon from ancient Babylon believed he was conjuring up demonic entities, and that seal would keep them at bay, and he could use them at his will through earlier forms of Jesuit witchcraft. The Rothschilds claim that they are Jewish when in fact they are Khazars. They are from a country called Khazaria, which occupied the land locked between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, which is now predominantly occupied by Georgia. The reason the Rothschilds claim to be Jewish is that the Khazars, under the instruction of the king, converted to the Jewish faith in 740 AD. But of course, that did not include converting their Asiatic Mongolian genes to the genes of the Jewish people. You will find that approximately 90% of people in the world today who call themselves Jews are actually Khazars, or as they like to be known, Ashkenazi Jews. These people knowingly lie to the world with their claims that the land of Israel is theirs by birthright, when in actual fact their real homeland is over 800 miles away in Georgia. So next time you hear an Israeli prime minister bleating about the so-called persecution of the Jews, consider this: every prime minister of Israel has been an Ashkenazi Jew. Therefore, when all these prime ministers have curried favor with the West for their reestablishment of a Jewish homeland, they have knowingly and deliberately lied to you, as they were never from that region, and they well know it, because it is they who call themselves Ashkenazi Jews. Keeping in mind that biblical writings are manipulations of ancient knowledge, the book of Revelation, chapter 2, verse 9, states the following, which would appear to be about the Ashkenazi Jews. I know, quote, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, end quote. The most wealthy bloodline in the world, bar none, and the leader of the Ashkenazi Jews in the world today is the Rothschild family. As you will see in this timeline, the Rothschilds have obtained their position through lies, manipulation, and murder. Their bloodline also extends into the royal families of Europe and the following family names: Astor, Bundy, Collins, DuPont, Freeman, Kennedy, Morgan, Oppenheimer, Rockefeller, Sassoon, Schiff, Taft, and Van Dorn. However, these are not the only bloodlines to worry about. You are probably aware of the centuries-old practice undertaken by many Ashkenazi Jews where they would change their name in order for them to appear part of the dominant race of the country in which they lived, so as they could obtain influential positions in that country, which they would then exploit to serve their real masters elsewhere. There is plenty of evidence to prove the Rothschilds continued their deceptive tradition. Furthermore, the Rothschilds are known to sire many children secretly that they can put into positions of power when required. This started when the very first man who took the name Rothschild, who had a secret sixth son. Finally, remember the world is a diverse place. I could, if I wanted, change my name to Rothschild or any of the names listed above, and that would not make me part of this family any more than converting to Judaism in 740 AD will make these Ashkenazis Jewish. Please, therefore, do not automatically assume someone you see with the name Rothschild or any of the names listed above are part of the Rothschild criminal network. Furthermore, and most importantly, the majority of Ashkenazi Jews are innocent and not part of this network. Charles T. Russell, in an 1891 letter to Baron Lord Rothschild mailed from Palestine, outlined possible courses of action that could be taken to establish the Jews in Palestine. Russell's letters praised the Rothschilds' money, which established Jewish colonies in Palestine. Russell writes Rothschild, quote, what is needed here, therefore, next to the water and cleanliness, is a good government which will protect the poor from the ravenous and the wealthy. Banking institutions on sound bases and doing business honorably are also greatly needed, end quote. Russell continues, quote, may the God of Jacob direct you, my dear sir, and all interested with you in the deliverance and prosperity of Israel, and blessed will they be who, to any extent, yield themselves as his servants in fulfilling his will as predicted, end quote. When the Mormon Church needed financing in the late 19th century, they went to Kuhn-Loeb Company. The method that the House of Rothschild used to gain influence was the same that royalty had used for centuries, marriage. The Rothschild children, girls and boys, have had their spouses chosen on a basis of alliances that would benefit the House of Rothschild, but since consolidating world power, they generally have married cousins these last 2 centuries. Keep in mind they try to keep the bloodlines pure too, though. Jacob Schiff grew up in the house that the Rothschilds had at 148 Judengasse, Frankfurt. Jacob Schiff came to the United States with Rothschild capital and took over control of a small Jewish banking concern founded by 2 Cincinnati dry goods merchants, Abraham Kuhn and Solomon Loeb. He even married Solomon's daughter. In 1885, Loeb retired and Schiff ran the Kuhn-Loeb Company for the Rothschilds until 1920, when he died. During Russell's and Brigham Young's day, Lord Rothschild was considered the lay leader of the world Jewry. Edmund Rothschild was president of the Jewish Colonization Association, which was a major Zionist group. Anselm Rothschild indicated that his grandfather, Amschel Mayer Rothschild, had insisted in Clause 15 of his will to his children, quote, may they and their descendants remain constantly true to their ancestral Jewish faith, end quote. However, the will has been secret, and there is no way of knowing what it says. The Rothschilds have not remained true to the Orthodox faith. If this was actually what Clause 15 said, then something is amiss. The Jewish world has showered the Rothschilds with praises. The Rothschilds govern a Christian world, not a cabinet moves without their advice. They stretch their hand at equal ease from Petersburg to Vienna, from Vienna to Paris, from Paris to London, from London to Washington. Baron Rothschild, the head of the house, is the true king of Judah, the prince of captivity, the Messiah so long looked for his extraordinary people, end quote. The line of the tribe of Judah, Baron Rothschild, possesses more real force than David, more wisdom than Solomon, end quote. The Prairie de Sion, the elders of Zion, also relates to the Rothschilds, who are reported to serve on a Jewish council of elders of Zion. The Rothschilds have helped the Jewish people the Rothschilds' own way. For those who admire stinginess, the Rothschilds will be the greatly looked to. For instance, the extent of James Rothschild's charity to France to poor Jews was 5 francs, the equivalent of $1. Their dynasty has destroyed honest Jews along with Christians. Today, few dare criticize the Rothschilds. All right, let's talk about connections to secret societies real quick. The Rothschilds had played a major role in the Bavarian Illuminati, and it is known that at least one of the sons of Amsel was a member. As the reader remembers, Amsel placed his sons in the major European capitals where they each set up the principal banking houses. By their own secret intelligence services and their own networks, they could outmaneuver, any European government. The large amounts of voluminous correspondence by Rothschild couriers attracted attention, but no one ever stopped their personal intelligence and mail services. After the Bavarian Illuminati were exposed, the central occult power over the European secret society shifted to Carbonarism, a.k.a. the Alta Vendita. Sorry about that mispronunciation. Led by another powerful Rothschild, Karl Rothschild, son of Amschel. In 1818, Karl participated in a secret document that was sent out to the headquarters of the Masonry from the Alta Vendita. The Masons were quite distressed when a copy of this was lost and offered rewards to anyone who could return the lost copy. It was originally written in Italian. Its title translates, Permanent Instructions or Practical Code of Rules, Guide for the Heads of the Highest Grades of Masonry, end quote. The Masonic reference book, 10,000 Famous Freemasons, Volume 4, page 74, indicates 2 other sons of Amschel were Masons, James Mayer Rothschild and his brother Nathan Mayer Rothschild. James Rothschild in Paris was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason, and his brother Nathan in London was a member of the Lodge of Emulation. And Jewish Freemason Katz indicates Solomon Mayer Rothschild, a third member of the 5 brothers, was initiated into Freemasonry on June 14, 1809. The Rothschilds became powerful within Freemasonry. We find the St. Simonians, the occult religious millennialist forerunners of communism, praising Baron de Rothschild in their magazine Le Globe. Quote, there is no one today who better represents the triumph and equality and work in the 19th century than M. Le Baron de Rothschild. Was this Jew born a millionaire? No, he was born poor. And if only you knew what genius, patience, and hard work there required to construct that European edifice called the House of Rothschild, you would admire rather than insult it, end quote. Lionel de Rothschild, the day was added by the French Rothschilds, was involved with the first Communist Internationale. The Mason Mazzini, who helped start communism, praised Rothschild. Quote, Rothschild could be king of France if he so desired, end quote. Adolphe Cramoux, and again, total mispronunciation there, I apologize, was a French Jewish Mason. The Rothschild gave at least 1,000 to Cramoux to go to Damascus with Solomon Monk, and Sir Moses Montefiore to win the release of the Jews in prison there, and to convince the Turkish Sultan to declare the charges of ritual murder false. According to the 3 Jewish authors of Dope Incorporated, the B'nai B'rith was a spin-off of the Order of Zion and was organized as a covert intelligence front for the House of Rothschild. It is highly probable that the B'nai B'rith was used as a Rothschild's intelligence cover. The Rothschilds are prominent in the Bilderbergers too. The Rothschilds were closely related to the Council on Foreign Relations. Although many people today would not view the CFR as a secret society, it was originally set up as part of a secret society, and it was kept secret for many years, in spite of its awesome power. Carroll Quigley, professor of international relations at the Jesuit Georgetown University, exposed the Roundtable Group with his book Tragedy and Hope. The Rothschilds supported Rhodes to form De Beers. Later, Rhodes made 7 wills, which established a secret society modeled after the Jesuits and Masons to help bring in a one-world government centered upon Britain and the Rhodes scholarships. The intergroups was established in March 1891 and consisted of Rhodes, Steed, Lord Esher, Brett, and 33rd degree Mason Alfred Milner. A secondary circle of potential members of the Circle of Initiates consisted of Lord Balfour, Sir Harry Johnson, Lord Rothschild, Lord Grey, and others. Initially, Lord Rothschild was part of the inner group of Rhodes' secret society, but was replaced by his son-in-law, Lord Rosebery, who wasn't as conspicuous. The Fabian socialists dominated the staff at Oxford when the Rhodes scholars began arriving. These scholars then received indoctrination in preparation to become part of the international socialist New World Order. The Round Table Group developed from the inner executive circle of the Rhodes Secret Society. The outer circle was established after the start of the 20th century. The Round Table Group was extended after World War I by organizing a front organization, the Royal Institute of International Affairs. The Council on Foreign Relations was the American part of this front. The inner circle continues to direct the outer circle and its two front organizations, the RIIA and CFR. The CFR, which is the Council on Foreign Relations, is set up a number of fronts, including the Institute of Pacific Relations, IPR. All right, management. Let's go to this next little section here. Management of the Catholic and Tsars' wealth and the capture of the Orthodox Church's wealth. Early in the 19th century, the Pope came to the Rothschilds to borrow money. The Rothschilds were very friendly with the Pope, causing one journalist to sarcastically say, quote, "Rothschild has kissed the hand of the Pope. Order has at last been reestablished," end quote. The Rothschilds, in fact, over time, were entrusted with the bulk of the Vatican's wealth. The Jewish Encyclopedia, Volume 2, page 497, states it is a somewhat curious sequel to the attempt to set up a Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds that, at the present time, in 1905, the latter are the guardians of the papal treasure, end quote. Researcher Eustace Mullins writes that the Rothschilds took over all the financial operations of the worldwide Catholic Church in 1823. Keep in mind, too, ladies and gentlemen, the Catholicism is just a remake of the ancient religion of Babylon as well. And the Vatican is a huge tool of the Illuminati. Today, the large banking and financial business of the Catholic Church is an extensive system interlocked with the Rothschilds and the rest of the international banking system. The great wealth of the Russian Tsars was entrusted to the Rothschilds, $35 million with the Rothschilds Bank of England and $80 million with the Rothschilds Paris Bank. The Rothschilds financed the Russian Revolution, which confiscated vast portions of the Orthodox Church's wealth. They have been able to prevent, due to their power, the legitimate heirs of the Tsar's fortune to withdraw a penny of the millions deposited in a variety of their banks. The Mountbattens, who are related to the Rothschilds, led the court battles to prevent the claimants from withdrawing any of the fortune. In other words, the money they invested in the Russian Revolution was not only paid back directly to the Bolsheviks in millions of dollars of gold, but by grabbing the huge deposits of the Tsar's wealth, the Rothschilds gained what is now worth over $50 billion. All right, control over Satanism and witchcraft, our next little section. The Witchcraft Council of 13, which is under Rothschild control and in turn issues orders to various groups, one of the purest form of Satanism, can be traced to the Jewish Sabbatean sect and its Frankist spinoff. The leaders of this up to the Rothschilds were Sabbatai, and again, sorry about the pronunciations. You guys should know by now I'm horrible with pronouncing names. Sabbatai Zevi, 1626 to 1676, Nathan of Gaza, 16-something, it's really unclear the dates, Jacob Frank, 1726 to 1791, the Rothschilds, and the three connections between Satanism, evil, and money. Money naturally attracts itself to evil. Evil men believe in where there is a will, there is a way, and they are willing to sell their souls for their quote-unquote God money. They will employ evil to gain money, while most people are quite aware of these last two connections. A third may likely have escaped their attention. Thirdly, the principal group of men who cranked up international banking were Satanists from the beginning. These Satanists now are the ones who run the Federal Reserve and are responsible for the creation of the U.S. Federal Reserve notes. I'm sure most people know this by now, but the Federal Reserve is a private bank made up of numerous other banks owned by the Rothschilds. All right. Just having total control over the supply of U.S. paper money almost gives them leverage over the world's finances without mentioning they control the world's bank. That they have been related to the Jewish people does not mean that they have the Jewish people's best interest at heart. Initially, Sabbatai Zevi was rejected by many Jews. His sect gained momentum in second half in the 17th century in southeastern Poland. All right. Many divisions and battles between religious elements in the world have been encouraged and supported by the powers of wealth. Unfortunately, many have been fooled into thinking that being devout and faithful to God is the source of religious fighting. In some areas of the world, Muslims, Christians, and others have gotten along fine for centuries. Religious tensions do spring up to some degree from within the religions themselves, but the fuel to keep those fires burning and to light up conflicts often come from the powers of wealth. An obvious example is the Iran-Iraq War. Okay, control over World War I treaty. When Germany fell, Not only did Rothschild agents draft the treaty, prepare the idea of the League of Nations, but Max Rothschild was one of the 11 men who took control over the Bavaria. Max Rothschild was a Freemason in Lodge number 11, Munich, Germany. Connections to MI5, Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, Council on Foreign Relations. Okay. Victor Rothschild, who worked for J.P. Morgan and Company and was an important part of MI5, which is British intelligence. Victor Rothschild was also a communist and member of the Apostles Club in Cambridge. Lord Rothschild, one of the original members of the Rhodes Round Table Group, which developed into the CFR. It was the Rothschilds who had financed Cecil Rhodes beginning in Africa. The Rothschilds had several agents with their money got started and who still served them well, the Morgans and the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers were Marrano Jews. The original Rockefeller made his money selling narcotics. They weren't illegal then. After acquiring a little capital, he branched out in oil. But it was the Rothschild capital that made Rockefeller so powerful. Quote, they also financed the activities of Edward Harriman with the railroads and Andrew Carnegie Steel, end quote. All right, power within Christendom. The Rothschilds also wielded much influence and power not only in secret societies but also in Christendom's churches. The Salvation Army, on the suggestion of the Rothschilds, adopted the red shield, red shield, for their logo. One history of the Rothschild remarks, quote, the Rothschilds had rapidly propelled themselves into the position of immense financial power and political influence. They were an independent force in the life of Europe, accountable to no one and to a large extent reliant on no one. Popular lampoons depicted them as the real rulers of Christendom. Some of the Rothschilds had been involved in the campaign to loosen public morals. The first executive secretary of the National Student Forum was John Rothschild. This National Student Forum changed its name like articles of clothing. The organization had the following constituent groups: Radcliffe Liberal Club, Union Theological Seminary, Contemporary Club, Yale Liberal Club, just to name a few. A further development of this was the Youth Peace Federation, which consisted of the League of Youth of Community Church Methodist Epworth League, New York District, Young Judea, and Young People's Fellowship of St. Philip's Parish, to name a few. American religious men have ties to the Rothschilds, especially through their various agents. Harry Emerson Fosdick, who was pastor of Rockefeller's Church, was also among the presidents of the Rockefeller Foundation. John Foster Dulles, Council on Foreign Relations, was chairman of the board of the Rockefeller Foundation and married to Rockefeller Janet Pomeroy Avery. Remember, John Foster Dulles was an important Federal Council of Churches of Christ official. Every road leads back to the Rothschilds. Each of the various tentacles that conspiracy theorists have put forth, the Jews, the Masons, the intelligence communists, the international bankers, the Prior de Sion, the Catholics, the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, the New Age, the cults, each ties back to the Rothschilds' power. All right, let's talk about their power very quickly. Let's see, we got 7 minutes left. I'm going to go over today, so if you want to hear the end of the show after the 30-minute mark, I suggest going on to the actual website. But let me continue on here. I can talk for hours about Rothschilds. There's so much information about them, but okay. According to one source, it was estimated that they controlled half of the wealth of the world, end quote. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York was controlled by 5 banks, which owned 53% of its stock. These 5 banks were controlled by Nathan M. Rothschild and Sons of London. Control of the U.S. Fed is basically control over the world's money. That fact alone shows how immense the Rothschild power is. If one examines who has been appointed to head the Fed and to run it, the connections of the Federal, quote-unquote, reserve system to the Rothschilds can further be seen. Another private enterprise using the name Federal that the Rothschilds also direct is Federal Express. Anyone else might be taken to court for making their businesses sound like they are government, not the Rothschilds. It is appropriate for them to appropriate the name of Federal because by way of MI6 via the CIA, they instruct the U.S. government. Senators are bought and paid off by their system, as investigators of the BCCI are discovering. The Rothschilds have been intimately involved in witchcraft and the Illuminati since its early known history. The Kaiser of Germany seems to refer to them when he said, quote, the magic powers of money as wielded by the Lord of Lucre are powers of black magic at its blackest, end quote. If only half of the wealth is controlled by the Rothschilds, it indicates that if they are to be part of the world's rulership, they must have allies. All right, let's talk about the media quickly. Eustace Mullins has published his research in his book, Who Owns the TV Network, showing that the Rothschilds have control over all 3 U.S. networks, plus other aspects of the recording and mass media industry. It can be added that they control Reuters too. From other sources appears CNN, with Ted Turner being a self-admitted Zionist, which began as an independent challenge to the Zionist network monopoly, ran into repeated trickery and ended up part of the system. Money from BCCI has been one of the New World Order's financial systems for doing its dirty business, such as controlling congressmen, and is involved with INSLA, the Iran-Contra scandal, Centrust, and other recent scandals, which has tainted so many aspects of public power in the U.S., has also been behind CNN. Perhaps nothing dominates the life of some Americans as does the television. Americans sit themselves before the television set and simply absorb what it projects to them. On a day-to-day basis, the biggest way the Rothschilds touch the lives of Americans are the 3 major networks which are under Rothschild direction. Ask many people about Zionism, they will say that's the Jews. But while this is the impression the Rothschild networks in politics and the media have sought very successfully to sell as common knowledge, it is not true. It represents only a minority of them and many others who are not Jewish. Rothschild Zionism, in its public expression, is a political ideology based on a homeland for Jewish people in the Palestine and a belief that the Jews are God's chosen race, which with a God-given right to the promised land of Israel. They also believe that the real borders of Israel must encompass what is now Israel, including Gaza and the West Bank, still officially owned by the Palestinians, plus Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, or, as Genesis puts it, from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates. That's the public expression of Zionism, but at its inner core, it is a secret society created and controlled by the House of Rothschild. All right, that's Zionism. We're going to continue with it a little bit here. They have sought to sell the Zionism. Zionism means all Jewish people lies, so that they can condemn as anti-Semites and racist anyone who exposes the truth about Rothschild Zionism and its agents in government, banking, business, media, military, etc. The world's most extreme races are, after all, the Rothschild Zionists anyway. Israel is an apartheid state, every bit as much as were apartheid South Africa and apartheid America. And by that, I don't mean, this is from the writer of this portion I stole this from, the evil that is inflicted upon the Palestinian people minute by minute, day by day, but also the extraordinary racist divisions within Jewish society, with the black Jews from Ethiopia, for example, treated as little more than vermin. So let us get past the calculated smokescreen that challenging Rothschild Zionism and the horrors of Israel means you are anti-Jewish, and instead look at the simple facts that they don't want you to know and acknowledge. By contrast, a large number of Jewish people are not Zionists. Some even vehemently oppose it and support the Palestinians in their battle for survival against the onslaught of genocide from the Israel government and military funded by the United States. Jewish people organize, protest, and call for boycotts of Israel in response to the Rothschild Zionist agenda for the Palestinians, and yet how many people know that who glean their information from the mainstream media? How many people know, as portrayed in the picture, there's a picture I'm going to post on the group, it's a very interesting one, but we'll talk about that later, that many religious Jews abhor the demands by the Rothschild Zionists for a U.S. attack on Iran and have had warm meetings with Iran's president, Ahmadinejad, to give their support. No one who only gets their news from the Rothschild Zionist-controlled mainstream media would know any of this, because they push only one line: Zionism means all Jewish people, end of story. The Rothschilds have a network of organizations, including B'nai B'rith and its offshoot, the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, that work with other Rothschild-controlled groups to target anyone who gets close to seeing the elephant in the living room and exposing it for all to see. They attack and undermine them in every way they can to stop the simple and devastating truth coming to light, that the Rothschild Zionists control the mainstream media, Hollywood, and the movie industry, governments, not least in the United States, and crucially, in the light of current events, they control global finance and commerce. The key economic post in the United States is the head or chairman of the Federal Reserve, the privately owned and Rothschild-controlled cartel of banks that hilariously call themselves collectively the Central Bank of America. A national central bank should be answerable to the people. Otherwise, it's just another private bank lending the government money which the population has to repay, plus interest. The latter describes the U.S. Federal Reserve, which, as the saying goes, is no more federal than the Rothschild-controlled Federal Reserve. The Fed prints money to literally cents on the dollar and then lends it to the government at interest or profit. I'm coming off in 10 seconds, but I'm going to continue on past the mark. So please go to the website to hear the rest of the show. I should be on for another 15 minutes after that, all right? When a great scam, if you can get away with it, and because the Rothschild networks control the government and media as well as the Federal Reserve banks, they have the whole thing stitched up because the Rothschild Zionist Secret Society network have their agents in governments, the banking system, including the international institutions like the IMF, and control the reporting of their activities through ownership of the mainstream media. As a result, if it is happening economically and politically, it's because the Rothschilds want it that way. Be it in banking, stock markets, commodity markets, currency, valuation, and price of gold, the lot. The work of finance is dictated by investor confidence, and who controls that? Those who have the power to control the media, government, and central bank financial statements, and have the financial resources to move trillions around the financial markets every day. In other words, the Rothschilds and their key lackeys. It is impossible to become president of the United States without support from the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, a massive Rothschild Zionist lobby group currently headed by Obama friend and funder Lee Rosenberg. It is also very difficult to hold high office of any kind if AIPAC doesn't approve, and a real struggle to even become a member of Congress or the Senate if AIPAC is against you. As former BBC and independent television news correspondent Alan Hart wrote in Zionism, the Real Enemy of the Jews, Jewish people make up less than 2% of the American population, but account for 50% of the political campaign contributions. And that 50% is overwhelmingly made up of a few Rothschild Zionists and is not in the least representative of half the Jewish population. One investigation discovered that 80% of members of parliament in the now ruling Conservative Party are members of the Friends of Israel, which has the stated goal of supporting anything that is good for Israel, the Rothschilds who own Israel. It was the Rothschild network that orchestrated the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, the war of terror and justification, September 11th. 9/11, the Rothschild Zionist connection. Quickly, I'm going to go over this. The lease of the Twin Towers at the World Trade Centers was bought just weeks before September 11th by the businessman Larry Silverstein, who's a Rothschild Zionist, and Frank Lowery, who's also a Rothschild Zionist, who both have very close links to Israeli leaders, including current Prime Minister, when this was written, Benjamin Netanyahu, who said that what happened on 9/11 was good for Israel. The World Trade Center deal was struck with Louis Eisenberg, who's a Rothschild Zionist, the head of the New York Port Authority, vice president of the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and a former partner of the Rothschild-controlled Goldman Sachs. Eisenberg is also close to the Israeli leadership. It was Silverstein who said in the television interview, which he now deeply regrets, that when another of his buildings in the World Trade Center complex, Building 7 or the Solomon Brothers building, was on fire, the decision was made to pull it, quote unquote, the classic term for a controlled demolition. Soon after this decision, the building, which had not been hit by a plane, did indeed come down into controlled demolition. It is the Rothschilds' dual control of America and Israel that has led to astonishing amounts of American tax dollars being transferred to Israel in military and financial aid. One arm of the Rothschild is simply giving it to another. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, Americans are losing their homes, losing their jobs, becoming homeless, and their tax dollars, which are illegal to begin with, most of it is going to the Rothschilds. Funding, we give billions to Israel, the rich nation of Israel, every single year for their fascist military actions. All right, John J. Mearsheimer and Stephen M. Walt write in their book, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. Israel receives about $3 billion in direct foreign assistance each year, which is roughly 1/5 of America's entire foreign aid budget. In per capita terms, the United States gives each Israeli a direct subsidiary worth about $500 per year. This largesse is especially striking when one realizes that Israel is now a wealthy industrial state with a per capita income roughly equal to South Korea or Spain. The Rothschilds have spent a century hiding the true and ever-gathering extent of their global control, and that veil must be lifted for the mass of the people to see. So to sum up, the Rothschilds created Zionism in order to help push their globalist agenda under the guise of a greater Israel. The Rothschilds fund both sides of every major war for profit and consolidation of power. The Rothschilds funded both sides of World War II for this reason, but also pushed the Nazis into power with their partial bloodline of Hitler to push the German Jews to Palestine to create the Zionist agenda of a greater Israel by bombing Israel into existence in 1948 with 3 terrorist groups that later became the IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Forces. The Rothschilds created the UN after World War II. The Rothschilds own all of the central private banks that enslaved nations with debt. The Rothschilds own the IMF and World Bank that further enslaved third world nations while stealing their natural resources. The Rothschilds own all the major media outlets that implant false beliefs about global events. The Rothschilds dictate U.S. and U.K. foreign policy through their Zionist placeman. The Rothschilds have Zionist control over Hollywood, and that influences contemporary culture. The Rothschilds created all of the so-called think tanks that influence foreign policy. And finally, the Rothschilds follow Jesuit witchcraft practices, Satanism, and follow their orders from a higher order of demonic, possibly reptilian entities. It is time that they get exposed. Wake up, ladies and gentlemen. They are the tip of the pyramid in this third-dimensional reality. It is time to expose them. You don't hear about them that often, do you? I'm sure many of my listeners do, but most people do not. It's time to expose them and stop going along with it any longer. If a few hundred people stopped paying their federal taxes, nothing would happen and those people would go to jail. There's no law to pay taxes, but these taxes are paid to the Rothschilds, the federal taxes, which aren't even federal. They're private Rothschild taxes for you to live. If we were all to stop paying taxes, there's nothing they can do about it. So we need to really understand the true power of the Rothschild family, who were once known as the Bowers, who further back, I don't know what they were called back then, in Babylon, their bloodlines created the money systems that we use now, that are used now to control the global masses, the global population through money. Money, which is nothing but digits on the screen and worthless paper. It's not even redeemable in gold anymore. It's worthless paper that tells you, do you have enough money to have a roof over your head? Do you have enough money to feed your children? Do you have enough money to have clothes on your back? If not, you can live on the street. Do you have enough money to buy food, even if you live on the street? This is all Rothschild control. It's going to come tumbling down, but it's up to us when it's going to happen. If we stop going along with it, if we refuse to acquiesce to any of this any longer, then it's done. It's done. It's time to wake up. It's time to expose this for what it is. I am getting married next weekend, so I am not sure what I'm going to be doing my show on. If I do a show next week, it's going to be something more soft, more calm. Who knows? I might tap into higher consciousness or something else. But I'm sorry I went way over, and I'm hoping that some of you were able to go to the website to hear the end of the show. The Rothschilds, you can just go on for hours and hours and hours about them, so I tried to consolidate this as much as possible. But I'll talk to you guys next week. I hope you have a wonderful week. Please help to expose this insanity so that one day we can all wake up and not go along with it any longer. I love you guys, and take care.